Jennette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died. Let's talk about it. First of all, I just want to say about this book, I enjoyed it more than I ever thought I would. I don't think I've sat down and read a memoir in ever. I primarily read fantasy books, so this was definitely out of my comfort zone, but I loved iCarly as a kid and was so invested after hearing bits and pieces of Jennette's story that I wanted to sit down, read it, and figure out what was going on in here. And wow, I'm so glad I did because it was so good. Also, time out. I guess spoiler warning if you haven't read it, but does it really count as spoilers when it's somebody's actual life? I'm not super sure, but we're gonna be discussing it, so if you haven't read it, buckle up. The book does follow a chronological order where it starts when she's very young and continuously goes until almost present day. Obviously the book has been out for a couple years, so not quite present day, but almost, and it does follow that order. It's not skipping around to different phases. So in the very beginning of the book, it kind of starts with her basically talking about her home life before she gets into acting, and wow, I knew her mom had a hoarding problem, but I didn't realize how bad it was. Like in the book, Jennette says that her and her brothers had to sleep on Costco mats in the living room because their bedrooms were just completely full of stuff, and I did not know it was to the extent of, oh wow, this is really bad. I didn't know that. But not long into the book, she finally gets her first acting gig, and there are times where Jennette describes multiple different acting gigs that she was a part of or tried out for, etc., etc. So after the early stages of her childhood, when she now more or less has an established resume of many commercials and individual episodes that she acted in, she eventually does land the role in iCarly as Sam Puckett. iCarly was one of my favorite childhood shows. I think in 4th grade, I want to say it was 4th, it might have been 3rd, but I think it was 4th, I had an iCarly messenger bag that was my backpack for the school year, and I thought I was so cool. I truly thought I was the coolest kid in school because I had this backpack. I even had the toy of Sam's remote, and I thought that was so cool too. In fact, I might even still have it somewhere. I have no idea where, but I feel like that's something I wouldn't get rid of, but I'm not sure. So hearing that iCarly was such a nightmare for Jennette was very disheartening, but I'm also so glad that she has come out with her experience. And if you haven't seen it, you should definitely watch the Quiet on Set documentary because it does look into Dan Schneider more. But in Jennette's book, she talks about her relationship with the creator and says that one moment he can be very nice, basically hyping you up and just a nice dude, and the next he could be screaming in somebody's face to make a grown man or woman completely break down and cry because he's so mean and angry and just a lot of negative emotions. And there were times where he would invite Jennette for dinners, just the two of them, and peer pressure her to drink and just be inappropriate. Because at the time, obviously, Jennette was a minor. So it's very weird to have one-on-one lunches, dinners, whatever, and also peer pressuring alcohol is pretty... Why? Like, why would you want her to have that? Why do you care so much to pressure her into it? But there were some good things that did come out of iCarly, because Jennette says her and Miranda were really good friends and got close because of the show, and even after the show they remain friends and are still friends to this day, and apparently are very close with each other, which was that made me feel good reading. I'm glad that something good came out of her experience there. Besides dealing with the creator, there were other things she was dealing with during her time in iCarly that I was like, wow, this girl cannot catch a break. For one, she basically is having her very first boyfriend and basically kind of boy experience encounter, all of that. But her mom is super controlling and no boys are allowed, so this is a secret relationship. And it's also very questionable because at the time, Jennette is 18 and the guy in question, his name is Joe, he was in his 30s, and when they first were kind of being flirty, he had a girlfriend at the time. Very weird age gap, and he was already in a committed relationship. It's just not great, but Jennette doesn't know any better and is interested in the guy, and they basically have a secret relationship. But even after Joe breaks it off with his girlfriend so they can officially start dating, their relationship is not healthy. It's very toxic. Jennette says that they are fighting half of the time that they're together, and the fights are ugly. I guess not in the physically abusive way, but it's a lot of screaming matches apparently, and just not good for her. She's already dealing with other stuff she doesn't need this as well, but this is what happened. And what brought everything to a head is, I guess, Nickelodeon gifted their stars to go to Hawaii and they could bring a +1. And Jennette lied to her mom and brought Joe with her there. And while they are having a good time, you know, they're on vacation, they're trying to have a good time, she sees out of the corner of her eye, paparazzi have taken pictures of the two of them together. And now she starts freaking out. And this is the picture in question. I mean, there were multiple pictures, but this was the main one because obviously, not that much later, it was posted online in an article. Her mom saw it, and all hell broke loose. She called Jennette a million times, left her a bunch of messages, texted her so much, just basically berating her and just calling her horrible names, and then in the end, pretty much disowns her. But let's put a little asterisk next to disown her, because at the end of this disowning of her daughter, she asked Jennette to give her money for a new fridge because theirs went out. Seems pretty weird if you disowned someone to then ask them for money. When she finally gets home, she wants to meet up with her mom and maybe they could talk it out in person and it'll be okay. But when they do meet up, her mom never brings it up, never talks about it, does not bring up the situation, does not bring up all the nasty names she called her or the disowning of her. It's just never talked about, and Jennette also doesn't bring it up, so it's just something that is never brought up again. That seems so unhinged to me. You literally just disowned your daughter and then you're never gonna talk about it again, and you're gonna pretend that everything's fine? That you didn't disown her and just call her such horrible, horrible names? You're just gonna sweep that under the rug, it's fine, we'll just forget about it? That's crazy. And then eventually Sam and Cat happens, and that whole thing is where basically shit really goes down. As filming of it progresses, Jennette is feeling a little bit of jealousy towards her co-star Ariana Grande, and some people say it was because they were paid different amounts. Jennette confirms in the book that they were paid the same amount, so it's not because of that, but she does talk about that she was jealous, but it was mainly because Jennette is stuck being Sam Puckett. That's all she's recognized for. That's all she does. Her career really isn't going anywhere, whereas this was during the time Ariana Grande was becoming who we now know Ariana Grande to be today. She was singing at, Billboard's Music Awards. She was going to all kinds of other things, being on magazine covers and hanging out with so many other, top tier A-list celebrities, and none of that is happening for Jennette, and it is just deteriorating her mental health. On top of she's still dealing with an eating disorder, and her mom is sick again, and during Sam and Cat is when her mom does pass, and it's just a lot for her to deal with. She's dealing with everything. The only thing that's keeping her going on Sam and Cat is that she was promised that she could be a director for one of the episodes. And so she keeps waiting for an episode to direct because she honestly, it seems like she wanted a pivot in her career to no longer be the one in front of the camera acting. She wanted to be the director. And she was promised at least one episode she would be a director. And as filming continues, finally they're on the last episode to film, and lo and behold, she is not the director. It affects her so much that on set she has a full-blown panic attack and basically everything comes crashing down around her. It's not good. But Sam and Cat winds up getting canceled anyway because this was during a time when the creators' allegations were first coming to light, and after it's canceled, she gets offered $300K from Nickelodeon as basically hush money. Obviously, for professional reasons and legal reasons, they are not calling it hush money, but that's what it is. And immediately Jennette turns it down. It's like, absolutely not, no. So now things are looking slightly up because she seems to be really happy that Sam and Cat is over with. She doesn't want to be part of Nickelodeon at all. And now she's thinking maybe she can still do acting, but pivot her career to not be in kid shows. So she gets a lead role in a Netflix show, and then she meets the next boy that she eventually gets into a relationship with that is another very toxic relationship. At the beginning, it's not toxic, but as things progress, Jennette is trying to go to therapy to help her bulimia, and she's trying to better herself, but her boyfriend, Steven, he is going through his own issues that all of a sudden he is now really, really big into Catholicism, like a lot, to a point that he truly believes he is the next coming of Jesus Christ. And Jennette is dealing with her own problems that she actually, like, she cannot deal with her stuff and his stuff. Eventually, Steven does get the help that he needs, and afterwards he's like, wow, that's crazy that I actually thought that. But then a new problem arises that he gets addicted to weed, and he smokes so much that he's almost in a catatonic state all the time. All the time. And it's just not good for either of them. Jennette is struggling enough as it is to get through her bulimia treatment, and it's a lot of work. And eventually the relationship gets to a point where Jennette is like, we have to end it. It's not being good for either of us. It is what it is. And during these times, I'm thinking, okay, now we're past all like the total craziness, right? No, because near the end of the book is when her dad comes out to her to say, hey, by the way, I'm not actually your dad. Sorry. And so a whole new bomb was dropped on her that her father was not actually her biological father, and she had no idea. Now there is a point where she does write that she went to go meet her biological dad and the meeting went well, so I mean, that's awesome. I don't know if any future relationship developed or not, but she at least met him. And basically, to wrap up like the end of the book, by this time she has quit acting completely. She has no desire to go back to it whatsoever, regardless of what show it's for. Kid show, not a kid show, doesn't matter. She's not doing it. And somehow, in one chapter, she writes that she acknowledges all of basically the wrongs her mom did to her, because throughout the book, it's very clear that in Jennette's eyes, her mom can do no wrong. And at least her first therapist, when her therapist tried to bring up maybe the fact some of her mother's actions weren't that great on her, Jennette completely freaked out and never saw that same therapist again. And then near the end of the book, in the one chapter, she talks about her acknowledging a lot of the wrongs that her mom did. But there never was a point where she actually talks about how and when she actually realized that her mom caused a lot of the problems and issues that she went through. That's never really talked about, so I'm guessing it must have been a very personal journey that she couldn't even put into words to put into a chapter, which is totally fine. I mean, we don't need to know everything. I won't lie, I will say I'm curious to how she finally reached that conclusion, but we are also not entitled to it. So I'm just happy she was able to do it and come to terms with it, and reading at the end that she had a much healthier relationship with food and was actually eating foods that she enjoyed and was not purging them. And that was absolutely wonderful, because during the book, when she was at her lowest points and hearing how much she was struggling with food, it was just so heartbreaking to read. Now, I know I have been talking for a hot minute, but I will say I did kind of just glance over the majority of things that were in here. This was all like a big picture overview and kind of highlighted some things that I took interest in and wanted to basically add some extra commentary on, but there was still so much more in this book that I highly, highly recommend everybody to read it. I will say the chapters are really easy to read and digest because they're like max 3 pages long. So there's a bunch of chapters in the book, but all of them are super short, which at least for me made it very, very easy to read quickly. But if you don't wind up reading the book, at least I kind of pinpointed the biggest things that happened in it, so you at least are a little bit informed there. But if you have read it, or even if you hadn't, go off of what I said, I would love to hear thoughts on what you actually thought about it, because there were times my jaw was on the floor reading about what she was dealing with or going through, or what scenario she was in, that I'm like, oh my god, how can this all be happening to one person? How is Jennette going through all of this and coming out okay on the other end? Honestly, such big kudos to her. I hope she keeps doing great things. I mean, the book has gone super, super well. At least on my copy, it says over 2 million copies sold. Now, I've had this book for a hot minute, so I don't know if that's now like 3 or 4 million or something. I have no idea. But this was a huge success for her, and I hope she continues to do huge successes of whatever they may be. Obviously, from how she talked about acting, it's not going to be about acting, but hey, hopefully she will get a directing role, or maybe like a screenwriting or something like that. I bet she seemed to very much like the writing aspect of things. So I hope whatever she does, it goes well for her and she can just keep thriving. At this point, I'm rambling. Point is, you should buy this book. Support Jennette. read it and hear about her story. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.